is Adam with Tech Dive AV Club, and we're in Movie Studio 17 Platinum, which is the newest version, and I'm excited to be telling everybody all about it. If you want to know the differences and the features and a review on that, I got videos on that as well, but this is an introduction to how to use the software. If you're new to video editing, though, and you want to start learning how, this is the video for you. When you open the software, you'll notice this screen right here. This is the welcome screen. And I have individual videos talking about the guided video creator and the easy edit modes. But this video is how to use the power user mode, which is the software proper. This is the full version of the software. And specifically, this is for Movie Studio Platinum. Most of this will also apply to Vegas Pro Movie Studio 17. However, very few of the options will be missing in the immediate version. So if you notice any differences having the base version and the platinum version, that's probably the difference, is that this is the platinum version, not the base version. I do have a Udemy series which does explore how to use the software and also teaches editing theory if you're interested in that. But if you just want to learn where the buttons are and how to get started and some of the basics about the acronyms and things that you're running into so you kind of understand what you're doing, this is the tutorial for you. So let's get started. I'm going to select Power User Mode, and the reason it's asking me if I want to save changes to Untitled is because I have an untitled video project from another tutorial that I've worked on, and I'm just going to hit no because that project doesn't matter to me right now. And this is the very next thing you'll see. Now, the dashboard is covered much more in my easy edit modes, but this is a quick way to find things. If you're not used to finding anything, this dashboard will help you find things. If you exit out of the dashboard and you want to find it again, you just can go to View, go to Window, and select Dashboard, and then it will pull it right back up. So you can always get back to this. But I recommend turning it off because for this video, I'm going to be your dashboard. I'm showing you where everything is. But if you do need some help finding things, that is a great place to get started. Now, this is your video software as a whole. I'm going to hit Project New because I want you to see what happens. I'm going to hit No again. See what happens when you hit New Project and start from there, because it's going to ask you some questions and I don't want you to be scared about these questions. First thing, it says region. Just be honest and select your region, America or Japan. The reason why I ask that is because there are some standards that are common to America and Japan that are different than Europe and Asia, most notably NTSC and PAL, and so it'll go ahead and start you with what's more suitable for your region, so just be honest and select that. Now, stereo versus 5.1 surround sound, I highly recommend if you're a beginner and you're not editing 5.1 surround sound. I do have a video on how to edit 5.1 surround sound though if you're interested. But stereo just means two speakers, so whether you have two speakers and a subwoofer or two speakers, this is the kind of editing setup that you need to select. Stereo. This is typical for YouTube and things like that. What you're probably going to want to select is internet video, and this will be your typical video style that most cameras film in nowadays, and that most people are using when they've screen captured, or most people are using when they've downloaded a video from the internet. However, if you know specifically you're using one of these other formats, like if you have a DV tape or an HDV tape that you're recording from, then I would select what you specifically know. But, like, for example, if you pulled it from a DVD. But this is most likely what you need. When in doubt, select this version. And you can name your project here. I'm going to name this Project Example. And it shows you where it's going to be saved. For me, it's going to be saved in my Documents folder, specifically in the Movie Studio 17 Platinum Projects folder. And I'm going to hit Manage Project Files. And that's going to create a new folder named after my project. And I'm going to hit OK. Let me show you that new folder. So if you go to your Documents, you can actually go to your Movie Studio 17 Platinum Projects, and then here, Project Example is the new folder I created. You'll notice there is no Project Example created yet as a Movie Studios project, because all I've done was really make the folder and name it, but I've not saved anything yet. Let me show you what happens when I do that. So let's go up here and say Project, Save, and as soon as you save your project for the first time, you'll see this right here in your Project Example folder. And this is a .vf file. .vf files mean that it's your Movie Studios file, and that's what you're going to open up and use. If you're going to be editing with any other media, I highly recommend you add it to this folder right here, because even though you can do it from any folder, I'm going to copy because I want it in both places for me, but you can just drag and drop for your purposes as long as you're okay with that being where the video lives. But when you put your videos in the same place, you can actually share this whole folder with somebody, and they'll be able to open this project and edit everything because they'll have access to all your same media. So if you're sharing, that's a great way to do it. Make sure that it's all in the same folder. That's a good workflow. You don't have to do this. That's just a suggestion. So this is the Vegas project, and this is the media we're using. However, that media isn't in the project yet. You'll see this is empty. So you can either add it by going and finding that in the Explorer, or you can just select this project media, which is selected by default. This is a tab section here. Just make sure that tab is selected. And then you can highlight these videos and then drag them from your Windows Explorer right to the project. Now they're in the project. And you can see when you highlight them, it actually tells you information about the video if you're curious. And for us, it's actually different than the video project we selected. So we selected kind of a standard 30 frames a second 720p project setting earlier. And if that is the case, because this is a 4K video, that's the major difference. It's almost the same, but this is 4K. So when we drop it in, it's going to say, hey, wait, this is different. Do you want to set your project video settings to match this media? And I would say yes if you know that that is going to be the most common media. This is both shot with the same camera, so this is the most common media I'm going to be using, so I'm going to say yes. And now, like if you, for example, photos, you may not want to select that because photos are a different aspect ratio and things, and that might make your video look a little wonky. You want to keep with the project settings you've already selected to make that video look like a standard, what's called a 16:9 video. So I've now clicked this and drug it to the timeline, and then you'll notice that the video is in the video track and the audio is in the audio track, and it displays this over time. So you'll see this is the timeline, and it's actually not right at the beginning. You can move it around by grabbing this little blue bar here, and you can slide it anywhere. And notice the audio comes with it as well because they're grouped together. That's a concept you'll need to know, is that a lot of times camera video will also come with its audio grouped together. And so right here at the start, you see 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, all those zeros there. You can scroll in and see the details in the timeline with your mouse wheel. So when you scroll in, you'll notice something. You actually see an extra little piece of information there, and that is the 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and it jumps back to 0. That's because our video is 29.97 frames per second, which is another way of saying 30 frames per second. There's a reason that it's not a full 30, but don't worry about that. It's not going to bother you. So this is your frames. There are 30 frames in a second. This is your seconds. This is your minutes. And then let me move the cursor. This is called the cursor. This is your hours. You notice that too. Your cursor will show you a different part of the video. So if I select another part of the timeline, the cursor will move and it will stay on the frame. It can't go in between frames. Now for audio, it can go in between frames if you're editing audio only, but since this audio is grouped with video, it won't go in between frames because frame is the smallest unit that you can use in video. When you scroll back out, you can see that you can actually search through your video very quickly with this scroll key, and you can even slide it back and forth up here. If you grab it right at the top of the cursor, you can slide it back and forth by clicking and dragging and seeing your whole video very quickly and finding the spot you want. So the next thing I'm going to suggest we do is delete this picture in picture track. And this is an important little skill. If you highlight it by clicking it, see, it's highlighted now. I'm going to hit the delete key and it's gone. The reason I suggest that is because you might start using that track, but you can always add that effect back, and there's actually 3 different ways to use that effect, and we're going to cover some of that information. But the thing I want you to know is that's actually going to confuse you and get in your way right now. So go ahead and delete that, and we're going to pretend it doesn't exist for the moment. So you'll notice too there is a track called text and a track called music. That's just the name they suggested for it. You can call this anything. You can call this Bill, And you can call this not music. It doesn't matter what you name these. You can click on this little area, double click it, and name it anything you want. This is just notes. What you need to realize is these two are video tracks and these two are audio tracks. If you have the base Movie Studio Platinum, you can add 10 video tracks and 10 audio tracks. If you have Movie Studio Platinum, not the base version, but Platinum, then you can actually add 200, which is a huge deal. You can right click and insert video track on the tracks themselves. So what these are layers. Think about this as layers. If you've ever used a program like Photoshop or something, these are layers, the same kind of thing. And I'll show you how layers work in just a moment. But essentially, a layer on top is just on top of this video. So I will show you more about this in a second. I just want to demonstrate something. See, I put text on top and it covered up my video preview. If that happens, you can always move windows around by grabbing them, and you can hit Control to dock them somewhere else, or you can just leave them free floating. However you want to do that, that is a good note to make. But if your video preview disappears, you can look at it right here. Also, quick note, this is a great time to talk about that too. If you ever get confused, you're like, things are missing, I've deleted things I shouldn't move, and now I can only see my timeline or something like that. Just go to View, Window Layouts, and hit Default Layout, and you'll instantly be back to the same layout that you're used to, the same layout you first saw when you started the video. So this sample text is just the text that you can move around through time, but you notice that it is on top of the video. If I move these and I put the video in this track that I called Bill, doesn't matter, that's just a track on top, and this text still exists, but you can't see it because this video is covering it up. That is the basics of layers. With audio, though, there is no covering up. With audio, you will hear more things. So you can actually individually change the volume and things like that. We're about to talk about that. But with audio, there is no covering up. More audio tracks equals more audio that you're hearing. But with video, there is a layering effect that happens where you will only see what's on the top layer. So you might have things cut or moved or whatever to see through multiple layers, but that's the principle that you need to understand. If you ever want to get rid of anything, you can highlight it and delete it. So let's talk about manipulating something on the timeline. This is the basics of video editing. You can grab something and move it around with the grab hand right there. If you want to cut it into pieces, just move the cursor where you want the cut and hit the S key. Hitting S on your keyboard makes a simple cut. It's super, super easy. The next thing you can do is you can actually fade the video by grabbing the corner, the top right hand corner of any video. You can fade it, and you can see here, I'm going to let you see what happens. That fades to black by grabbing the top right hand corner. And you can see where you can really start getting some power in editing. The same is true with audio. You can fade your audio in and it'll get louder and louder, and you can fade your audio out. So what happens if you just want less of your video? Well, if you go below that, you can go to the trim event start, and you can actually drag and cut your video slowly, one frame at a time. And you can actually add back video that you cut away. For example, I cut this video and moved it away. What if I delete it? Well, if I decide I want that back, since this is the same original source clip that this came from, it'll actually grow back from its original media. So it's not gone forever. I can just roll it back or cut it shorter. This is a rolling edit, and this is called a trim edit, and it's super easy to do. It is the most common way you're going to resize your video. But notice that this is the full length of the video right here at this notch. The video loops after that notch, and it starts at the beginning. If you want to stop and start the video just like I just did, just hit the space key to play and the space key to go back to where the cursor was. So that is a super handy tool. The next thing you're going to want to be able to do is drop in more media. So let's say we drop in 2 clips. Some things about this, if you push them together, they'll automatically crossfade. That means they automatically create a transition. If you don't want them to crossfade, you can actually, let me get rid of the extra video there. if you want them to touch, when they touch together, you see a snapping point. The snapping point is where a little blue highlight comes up, and that's where the video joins together, frame perfect. That means you can zoom in and there is no overlapping and no black gap. What happens when there's a black gap? When you don't have a video snapped correctly, you'll see it flash like that. And you don't want that. So snapping is a good feature. It teaches you, it shows you when something's touching perfectly. When you're zoomed all the way out on a big project, you can very easily leave black gaps without snapping. To turn snapping on and off, it's just this little magnet button right here. If it's highlighted, snapping is on. If it's not highlighted, snapping is off. And you can't see when you frame perfect touch something. So I highly recommend you leave snapping on. There's lots of useful tools down here. We're not actually going to cover all of them. One useful tool down here, though, is to play from start. Let's say you've done a lot of editing and you want to see your video from the beginning. You can actually hit this button right here. It looks like a combination of a pause button and a play button, but it's really a play from start button, and it'll start your project at the beginning of the timeline. You can hit the pause button to pause the video and the stop button to stop. The difference between pause and stop is if you pause, you can continue to play from where you started, but if you stop the video, you'll play from the cursor. So pausing moves the cursor along, see? While playing the video and hitting stop returns the cursor to where you started playing. So that could be handy if, depending on if you want to watch the same thing over and over again, or if you want to just kind of watch the video and pause it and then keep watching the video. So that is the basics of your stop and start here. If you want to go frame by frame, you can actually use the arrow keys, or you can use this little button right here, next frame. Remember, we talked about frames the smallest unit, and you can see it move here in the preview window. This is called the preview window. You can see your video move around right there. So while we're talking about the preview window, something you need to know about it for just the basics here. If you're having trouble viewing your video, if it's really, really laggy, just go to Draft and Auto. Your video will look a lot crappier, but that won't necessarily change unless you have a weird setting selected. But if you're following my guide, you won't have this weird setting selected. Changing your video to draft will actually let you view it quicker. It's easier on your computer to see this video in draft mode. It doesn't try to make it pixel perfect. It just tries to show you a rough cut of what you're looking at. And so it's easier on your computer. So if you're having a lagging kind of issue, that's what I would recommend. If you're not, then viewing it in best full is the clearest option you can have. And I recommend having that on if you can, if your computer will allow you to. You can also play and start from here in the preview window. And whenever you see a hamburger menu, that means there's more buttons available. So we are almost done with the basics of editing. We've talked about how to put things in and layer them. I do want to note a couple of things though. With audio, if you have audio in different tracks, you can actually change the volume of the tracks individually. Upping the decibels means the volume's louder. Lowering it to the minus doesn't mean it's in minus decibels means it's quieter than it was, not louder than it was. It doesn't mean you can't hear it. So you can also change which speaker it comes out of by changing the pan here, but I highly recommend not touching the pan until you're a little more comfortable with the software. Double clicking any slider returns it back to 0. So we're just about done. I want to show you adding effects and transitions and rendering something out. If you slide a video over top of another video, we just do it with both the audio and the video right now. Like I said earlier, automatically creates a crossfade. If you want that to be a different kind of transition, go to your Transitions tab, and you can select any kind of transition you want and drag it, click and drag it to your crossfade, and it'll automatically apply that transition. If you want to see your transition one by one, remember your arrow keys let you view it frame by frame. You can change anything about your transitions and effects with these dials, and they're all relevant to the transition that you've selected. If you decide you don't want to transition, just click on this little transition properties button right here on the transition. If you can't see it, zoom in with your mouse wheel. Once it's selected, you can hit this FX button, and it's just the FXX. It's the FX meaning the type of effect you added, and then you can remove it by hitting that button, and now it's gone. You're back to the crossfade you once had. And remember, we already talked about how to fade to black and how to fade audio out if you want to do that. And let's talk about adding effects. In the video effects tab, you have lots of effects, and you can search through them. This is all of them, but all of these things have everything in these tabs in a way that you can find them easily. But with the video effects tab here, with all the plugins, you'll notice that there are kind of correction plugins, color correction plugins, things to blur things, things to fix things, things to add special kinds of effects. And what I want you to know is that whatever effect you decide to choose, whether you're fixing something or whatever, to add it to the clip itself, all you need to do is take it and drag it to the clip. And now the whole clip is affected by this effect. But you'll notice that it's just this clip, it's not the other clip. And if you have multiple instances of this clip on the timeline, adding it to the clip on the timeline will only add it to that version. It'll only add it to what you drug it to. And this right here is where you see the effect chain. This is all the effects you've added. We're going to talk about pan crop in a second. That's naturally on every single video. But if you add more effects, it'll show up here in the effect chain. If you unselect it, it's bypassing the effect. So the effect's still there, but even if you render the video out, it's not going to be there. The effect is bypassed. So if you want to toggle what it looks like with or without it, this is the checkbox for it. Again, all these dials are representative of what helps you with this particular effect. Now, if you want an effect to be on the entire track, so this is why another reason you could use different video tracks. If you want it to affect both of these videos, we can actually add the effect to the track itself. So I'm going to add a very extreme effect. I'm going to something easy to see. I'm going to add a big blur to everything. I'm going to add an extreme blur, and I'm going to drag it to the track name video. And now everything on this track will have an extreme blur to it. And this is on the track itself. So if I take this video and move it to another track, the effect doesn't apply. And the same with this as well. This video goes back to its one effect, while if I move it to this track with the effect applied, it has two effects on it now, one coming from the video track and the other coming from the video itself. This is probably the more complicated part of this process. If you ever want to get rid of it, you can just hit this effects button and then select it, and this works for both the clip level effect, you can get rid of it there, or the track level effect. You can hit this button, select the effect you want to get rid of, and then hit remove. Now, the same is true with audio. You can actually add audio effects. There are no audio effects up here, but you can add your audio effects by just selecting this FX button, and then you get all these audio effects, including a pitch shift, parametric EQs, all sorts of different kinds of EQs and compressors and things like that. And you can add them directly to the audio clip itself, or you can actually check the audio effects by hitting this hamburger menu on the track. And there are 3 audio effects that come on every track. They're really just harmless unless you mess with them. And these are common audio effects that you'll be using on these tracks. I have much more detailed tutorials on how and why you'd want to use these. We are not covering that right now. I just want you to know that they exist. So that's changing volume. I want you to note too that you can actually change volume on clips the same way. So this changes the volume on the entire audio track, right? But if I move this volume down, now the volume's only being upped on this one audio track and not on the other. If I move it back, now it's upping it on both. I can actually change the individual gain. Gain is a little different than volume, but if you're new, just think of it as volume. It's very similar on what the effect's going to be. If you lower the gain by selecting this little button right here in the middle of a track, it lowers the volume effectively. So that's a way you can kind of quieten an individual track. So we're just about done with the basics, and then we're going to show how to render out a video. There's 100,000 things more I want to show you, but we got to limit it to what we can do. So if you find a video that you need to zoom in on or something, you will be doing that in the event pan crop. So this is a clip level. All these buttons are the clip level buttons, meaning that it only applies to this lens clip right here, not this graphics card clip. So if I hit this event pan crop button, you can use your mouse wheel to zoom in and see it more clearly. It shows you where the field of view is. If you grab it by the corners, you can zoom in and move it around. And you can see what I'm doing right here. We're not covering animation today, but this is where you could animate zooms and things like that. And there's all sorts of power you can do. This is a very powerful tool in both Pro and Movie Studio. But this is just the very basics of it. If you come in and zoom, this is how you can do basic zooms and crops. Now, if you want to get rid of this, you can just go to default and it'll go right back to normal. So the last thing I want to talk about is with every effect or anything, there's this little drop down thing right here called, these are your presets. And you can actually change how these presets work, and you can name them something different, and then you can actually select save preset, and when you do that, I know I spelled different wrong. When you leave and come back, you'll actually see it right here. Now my spelling mistake is forever there, but then you can use this effect again in its default state, or you can just select it out of the presets here in this menu, and it'll add back the exact same changes you did. So if you're making the same changes over and over again, I highly recommend creating a preset. So now we're starting to leave the area of new and starting to go into more advanced things. So I think it's time to jump back out and go to titles and text. So this is, if you go to your media generator and select titles and text, these is the most simple way to add titles and text. If you select one of these presets, it'll look just like where you hover your mouse over it above. And a lot of these, especially some of the newer ones, I have a video going over each one of these, has a really cool look to it. But if you just want a simple text, just select this default sample text. You can drag it and add it at any point. If it's over black, this has a transparent background by default. It'll be over a black background. If it's over the video, you'll still see the video. This little media generators thing will pop up. This, you can always resize any of these windows, and you can see how everything moves when I do that. This is something simple. You just change the text up here. I'll have a whole video dedicated to adding text, but this is the basics. You can change the color of the text. You can add in an animation, at what we were looking at earlier if you wanted to. See, this text kind of bounces in here because that's what I selected out of the titles. Animations, if you want none, just make sure it stays on none, then the text will stay perfectly still the entire time. You can change the size of it with the scale. You can change the type of text if you have it highlighted with your text fonts here, the font you choose, and you can move it around the screen just by selecting where it is on the preview window if this is highlighted. If this is not highlighted, you won't be able to grab the text, but make sure this is, make sure your text media is highlighted, and you can move it around the screen. There you go. Now, remember how with audio, when you grab this thing right here, it changed how transparent something was? You can actually change the transparency of a clip, like text or even video. See, that shows the black underneath it, by clicking the same button on a video track. See, this is the transparency bar. So that's how you make something transparent, very useful. And you can make it translucent, partially transparent. You can also do that in the color as well. This is the transparency bar, and this is your color wheel, where you are in your color wheel. So that is the very, very basics of adding text. If you want to render this out, you need to grab this little thing right here and highlight the entire video. Make sure you hit your snapping point at the end, and make sure you hit your snapping point at the very beginning to make sure the entire video is highlighted. You can always scroll up and down here to make sure that you're not left any media out. And then you can go to Project, and you can go to Make Movie. And now I've already gone over Make Movie in my easy edit modes. We're actually going to go to Render As, because this is what you'll be using more and more as you... This is the more powerful, more professional version of making a movie. And the most common thing you're doing, I'm assuming you're making a video for YouTube. If you're not, there are all sorts of options here that you can do, including just rendering out audio or images, sequence, and things like that. But we're going to select Magix AVC AAC MP4. These are what you're most likely using for video, like if you have a 1080p 25 frames per second or 1080p 30 frames per second, 720p 30 frames per second. This is exactly what it says it is. This is internet ready video. And you can use this default template here, and you can select Internet HD 1080p 29 frames per second. And this one uses your CPU to render. If you know you have a very beefy graphics card and you would like to use your graphics card to render, it may give you that option underneath it. For example, I have an AMD card, so it automatically gives me the option to render it out with my AMD card. It's just picking. This is the same kind of video file. The only difference between this option and this option is which part of my computer is going to be responsible for putting it together. For most people, you're just going to be using your CPU. You can even favorite this if you want to find it again really fast. And this is the best option for this video if I want a 1080p ready YouTube video. I can come down here and go to my render options, and I'm going to select Render Loop Region Only. And then I'm going to just name this anything I want. And you can select where it's going to save this project to. If it's going to save it back where you've pulled the video from, or if it's going to save it right now, saving it in my Movie Studio 17 Platinum Projects folder. But you hit Browse to change that. When you're done naming it, hit Render, and you can actually watch the video render out. This may take a while. It really just depends on how powerful your computer is and how complicated of a task you're asking it to put together when you render. So don't worry if this takes a long time. Just watch it through. And as long as you see movement here, it's very likely going fine. Even if you don't see a constant tick up in the percentage, as long as you come back and you see improvement, it's still working, it's still rendering. So this will take a minute, but when we're done, I'll show you what you can do with the file. So when the project's done, you can hit Open Folder to view file, and you can actually see the project right there where it saved it. This is the video. You can double click it and watch it. You can upload this to YouTube. It is a file and a video. It's just the done project. All this stuff down here has been combined and put into one thing. That's the export, that's the render. You're done. So we've made a video from start to finish in Movie Studio 17 Platinum. We've covered a lot of basics here. There is so much more you can learn, but this should be enough for you to put a video together and kind of fix it up a little bit and get it the way you want it and render it out. These are the basics. These are what you're doing the most in the software. So thank you so much for watching. I have tons more tutorials if you're interested. If you want to learn editing principles as well as just how to press the buttons and stuff, if you want to learn actually like thoughts behind editing principles and things, I highly recommend you checking out my Udemy course where we edit 3 different projects together. Also, if you buy the software through my affiliates link, that helps out this channel a ton. I'm making tons of tutorials about Movie Studio and Vegas Pro every day, so subscribe if you're looking for more. Like if this video helped you out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.